Yeah, I'll start doing the table.
One more plenary, and then same room. And then in the afternoon, there's like 12 different panels, and we're running a table. There's just a bunch of everything going on. We can hold this here for you if you want. There's one that guy wasn't. No Jack. Wait a second. Yeah, you can if no one's in there, if you don't mind, you can solve it. If you want to come in and out. If nobody's in there yet, they said
No Diddy.
I never did.
No Diddy for it. I don't touch no dudes on streets. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can use
All right, everybody, if you can start to make your way to your seats, we're going to get started in just a moment. So if you will, start making your way to your seats.
What did I do? I slept. No, I slept. I had no dinner last night.
I'm not gonna say anything. I'm moving. I'm so grateful for you and your work and your legacy. I'm yelling like you're free Palestine. It's upsetting me. I can't do it. Good morning.
My daddy talks.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Mercy. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. I don't know what's happening with the mic. It's on. I just have to lean into it. Okay. Welcome. Ramadan Mubarak to all who are celebrating. Here and around the world, the healing room on the second floor that Wakumi mentioned is available for prayer, rest, and quiet. So please prioritize participation of folks who are observing. and happy International Working Women's Day. As you heard from last night and this morning's panelists, this is an international struggle. And so we come today in solidarity with millions of women rising up in resistance around the world. We come today in solidarity with Palestinian women and with students, faculty, and staff at Columbia University, Barnard College, and the City University of New York, and at institutions like this across the country who are experiencing extreme repression for speaking out against genocide and imperialism, and for the rights and freedoms of Palestinian women in Gaza, the West Bank, and beyond. We come in solidarity with incarcerated and criminalized women around the world, with working women, Indigenous women, Black women, migrant women, trans women, queer women, disabled women, pregnant women, abortion-seeking and supporting people, HIV-affected women, drug-using and drug-selling women, sex-trading women, and feminists of color fighting for abolitionist futures everywhere. On this International Women's Day, from the prisons of New York State to the prisons of Palestine to the prisons of Goma, we say, free her! Free her! From the maquiladoras of Mexico to the sweatshops of Asia, we say, free her! From the detention camps in the US to refugee camps in the Sudan, we say, free her! From the colonized lands of Turtle Island to Haiti to the Congo, to Sudan, to Palestine, to Puerto Rico, to the Philippines, to Argentina, to Columbia University, and everywhere in the between, we say, free her! Free Palestine!
Free Palestine.
Palestine! Thank you. My name's Andrea Ritchie, and I am the co-founder, along with Mariam Kaba, of Interrupting Criminalization. And today is also a special day because the idea for Interrupting Criminalization was born 8 years ago to the day on International Women's Day 2017, following a gathering which included many of the organizations here today to strategize around how to respond to the first iteration of this administration. So if you want to learn more about our work, I have some material up here, and if you're a healthcare provider who is inspired by Kara's analysis of the military-industrial complex, I have a special treat for you. Come up and see it. Interrupting Criminalization's work is rooted in the knowledge that criminalization, and by that I don't just mean criminal laws, policing, and punishment, but as my beloved sister in struggle and mentor and teacher Beth Ritchie taught us, a political process of othering and creating an enemy within for whom rights do not exist in reality, who must be contained, caged, and ultimately eliminated and eradicated. This process of criminalization is central and instrumental to enacting and enforcing right-wing, authoritarian, and fascist agendas and regimes. That is why criminalization is the root we must pull on with all of our might in this moment and every moment, not only to resist the ravages of the current administration, but to resist every manifestation of the carceral state and the racial capitalism and imperialism it produces and upholds. So as we approach the halfway mark in the federal administration's first 100 days, power is rapidly being consolidated in the executive branch to accelerate the mass disappearance, detention, and deportation of migrants, to eradicate indigenous sovereignty, to target the very existence of trans people, as well as all queer people, I would argue, to criminalize pregnant people and abortion seekers and supporters, to intensify the repression of anti-genocide, pro-Palestinian protest, and ultimately any form of dissent or resistance, to entrench the US as a police state, and to eviscerate federal institutions, programs, services, and funding, placing the survival of millions in the US and around the world at risk. We may feel powerless, in the face of the deliberate deluge of rapid and catastrophic change. But we are not without power. And we also don't have the privilege of just putting our heads down and hoping it eventually goes away in 4 years, or that they don't come for us.
Right.
The lives of millions in the US and around the world are at stake. They are coming for all of us.
Right.
And no amount of complying in advance or trying to stay under the radar or avoid attention is going to save us. So it's each of our responsibility to use every single scrap of choice and power that is still at our disposal while we still can to deny our consent, to resist by any capacity and power of mass refusal and resistance while centering community care and defense.
That's right.
So we just heard from the previous panel about how we can draw on the past, on healing, ancestors, and spirit to fortify ourselves for the present. This panel is focused on the co part of SANKOFA, a clear-eyed and critical assessment of where we are in the present with a view to shaping the future aligned with our most liberatory dreams. We have incredible panelists today to help us do that, so we're going to jump in. We're going to try and keep it conversational. So I've asked the panelists to keep their responses brief but juicy, and you should follow up with them afterwards to get more juice and details about how we're going to enact our freedom dreams. So I'm going to start by asking everyone, and I'm just going to go down the line, starting with DaMareo. Just to start off with, how are you making sense of this political moment in the United States and around the world right now? Or, as beloved elder and ancestor Grace Lee Boggs often asked, what time is it on the clock of the world? What time is it?
I don't know how juicy I can make my response, but I will try to make it brief. I mean, my name is DaMareo Cooper. I'm a co-executive director of an organization called Popular Democracy, which is it's a network of 50 grassroots organizations. We are concerned with power building, like really thinking about how do we build power for the long term? How do we build power infrastructure, meaning relational? Just to get into it, I think the current moment we're in is, of course, everyone knows, like, it's the rise of fascism, or at least the full expression of fascism. One of the things that I've been paying close attention to is the way that the 14th Amendment is being attacked in like 1,000 different ways, whether you think about reproductive rights, if you think about the education system, meaning equal protection, Brown v. Board. If you're talking about what does it mean to be a citizen or a person inside of this country right now, when you think of immigration rights, you know, these things are all like sitting on the foundation of the 14th Amendment. Like a lot of the things that we've won have been sitting on the foundation of the 14th Amendment. That amendment actually is the first expression of humanity in the Constitution of the United States that was won through a civil war. And it said that people are supposed to be protected under the laws of this country. I think that what our opposition is doing, one, by setting up the Supreme Court in the way they've done, by putting all these like Federalist Society of judges on there and talking about what it means to America to be great. What moment is that? People think that means like before the 60s, that means before the civil rights amendments. That's just important for us to understand. I think like right now, the time on the clock is, we got to figure out some ways that we're going to stop breaking our side of the movement, meaning human beings that believe that other human beings should be protected by laws and by countries and governments and each other. And like, we have to figure out how to stop like going into our instincts, which is really, and I just say this, just the juicy part maybe, but like, I think we have to stop breaking down when we have conflict inside of our movements. Instead of finding commonality, we all turn into white supremacists. And then we ostracize, isolate, and try to destroy each other. And I think like we have to figure out how to stop doing that to each other. I think like right now is a time for us to emerge, like this healing conversation that was happening before needs to actually be put into practice. And we have to do that when times are difficult. So, yeah.
Thank you. Juicy indeed. I did forget to say that I'm also asking folks to introduce yourselves as you answer this question, because I can't do any y'all justice. So I'm going to invite you to do that for yourselves.
Okay. My name is Emani Davis. I'm the founding executive director of the Omowale Project, who was named for my father, Jomo Omowale, freedom fighter Jomo Omowale, who is now an ancestor. I think it's important to introduce myself as an original movement baby. I am 46 years deep in this thing. My father held me for the first time on Rikers Island when I was 6 weeks old, while he was fighting double homicide of two New York City police officers. 2 hung juries and an acquittal later. Thank you to my mama, Liz Gaines, who's also here today. Thank you for helping to get my daddy free. He came home when I was 3. But I spent most of my life with my father in prison. And so I want to begin by just saying I'm an original movement baby who grew up with my father mostly in prison, a dad who was an Attica brother and a minister for the Black Panther Party. And so the reason why I want to come in beginning there is that I actually am going to move on this panel the way I should move on this panel, which is that I'm home here, right? I've always been in these rooms. I was raised by this movement. And I have actually high standards and requests and expectations of where we need to be in this moment. I grew up with a sense of urgency. I also grew up never being reliant on this system. So when folks are so freaked out about what's happening, I feel very confused. Like, what did you think they were going to do for you? So for me, I'm really actually seeking the calm. One of the things that I've noticed every time I come in a collective space is that we super activate each other by continuing to talk about what they're doing. I'm really interested in what we're doing because we're still having babies and making love and making dinner. We're still doing our hair and putting our lashes on. Like, we still getting fly out here, right? We're still gonna love each other. And so in this panel, I wanna really be making sure that we come back to the center of like, who are we gonna be in this moment? This panel, they talked about these 3 R's, which was resilience, resistance, and rights. There's the other one is responsibility, right? We have a responsibility to one another in this moment. They're moving with fear. They're activating your nervous system. They are attacking us in that way. And so for me, I go to this brother Bayo, who has the quote, "The times are urgent, let us slow down." And so I really actually want us to think more critically about how much we're willing to activate one another. When we're activated and the brain turns off and we move in survival, we're pretty hopeless. We're not critical thinkers, we're not creative, we're not innovative. And I think as a child who grew up in this, I got a lot of politics in there. I got a lot of genius around struggle, around organizing, around revolutionary action. But there was a lot that was missing. I didn't get a lot about joy. I didn't really learn about rest. But one of the amazing things that happens in a prison visiting room, and I'm grateful that 9 prisons have returned visiting, they'll all come back. We're gonna visit our people. Is that my dad showed us in that place that in the flesh pit in hell, that we could slow down, that there was love present in those visiting rooms. We called them dance floors. And we called them that for a reason, because love was happening there. And so I think what I want to keep bringing us back to is the fact that we can thrive in this moment, that there are things that are being broken may need to be, that we've been talking about rebuilding and defunding and all this stuff for like 10 years. We ain't built nothing. I don't want to raise my children and crumble in ashes, right? And so I really think this is really a moment about who are we gonna be in this moment? Are we gonna rely deeply on one another? Whenever we go through tragedy and people ask me like, how are we gonna get through it? I always answer the same way, we're gonna get through it together. And the Sister Kara Page actually introduced me to this work in 2020 when everything fell out and I was trying to figure out what I was gonna do, and I built Omowale. I found her website and I said, oh, they've been doing this. My people from Enfield, North Carolina, like, I know about the country and I know that we've been doing this. And the one thing I never saw on my aunties' faces was fear. It didn't matter what was happening. They're gonna come in, you're gonna sit down, you're gonna be quiet, you're gonna eat. Somebody gonna braid your hair. They're gonna send you outside to go play. And the world was always on fire as all of those things were happening, but I did not see it on their face. And so me now as a young elder at 46, when the young people look at me, I make sure that they don't see fear on me. And it doesn't mean I'm not scared. It means that I know that I have the responsibility to be assuring them. And so when I look out at people in the audience that are older than me, I want to call you back to that. Remember that we're relying on you for your steadiness, for your guidance, for your counsel. I don't need you to be freaked out, because we've been here before. I need you to be sure-footed. I need you to remind me we've walked this path before and we're going to get through together. Okay, all right.
Wow.
Now do whatever you want to do.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, I'll try not to cry. That was beautiful, thank you. My name's Dhaksh. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a queer, trans Tamil person. I was born on my ancestral homelands in Ilangai, known as Sri Lanka. And my accent, which I think is quite unfortunate, comes from Australia where I grew up. So please forgive me for that. And I now live here on Lenape land. I'm here with the Surveillance Resistance Lab. So we look at kind of visibilizing the invisible systems of tech-fueled governance that increase corporate and state power over our lives. To provide some juice, because that seems essential. I'm also, my other life is as a fairy goddaddy of a queer and trans dating outfit called Ravenous. So if you're interested in that, come and see me later. But I'm here to speak about, I mean, I don't know what else I can add to what's already been said, but I would, just to focus on the tech dimension, I would say that we are dealing with a hostile takeover of the government, and it is consolidating power in industries and sectors that have long-standing power grabs. So Wall Street, big tech, all of their financiers, and the police and the military. And so what does that look like? It's not just a takeover of, it's not just about a particular policy or a particular technology, but it's actually an infrastructure of governance. So it's every aspect of governance. It's identity, mobility, financial transactions. So I think thinking about it as an infrastructure helps us to think about how do we resist. It's this infrastructure that they have deployed is narrative, it's discursive, so they've got a big cultural strategy, they've got tangible technology, so they want us to sign up to their financial transaction systems, digital IDs. What are the infrastructures that we're building to resist, and how can we move transnationally like they are and build really strong solidarity with transnational movements to fight back? So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrea James, and I am with a movement of sisters who know the experience of incarceration, separation from their children and families and communities, known as the Free Her Movement. And our organization is the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. And we work to end, free her, free her. We work to end the incarceration of women and girls, and to not wait, but to build systems of what different looks like, what we need in our communities. And so after, you know, we were built for this time. We've been getting ready for years. We have held back in 2018 across the country in 35 communities, town hall meetings led by incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, and the women and girls who took care of us while we were inside of these cages, and came out with a roadmap for us in our neighborhoods called Reimagining Communities. And Reimagining Communities is not just about the struggle we are in Massachusetts, my home state, for instance, to stop a new women's prison, which we have stopped for 4 years now. It is not just the work in Vermont. Our fearless Free Her Vermont leader, Jana, is over there fearless in the face of the stoppage of a new women's prison in Vermont and to close the prison. We focus on the New England area. We have Leslie Creedle in the back, Justice for Housing, fearless in the face of fighting. All formerly incarcerated people and directly affected people, women, unapologetically identifying ourselves as who we are, and to say that we will continue the work to end incarceration of women and girls, but knowing very well that it requires more than that work. It requires what we have been taught by Miriam and Andrea and Angela and Ruthie that we have to, and Sophia, Elijah, that we must focus also on what different looks like. And we must do it with the resources that we can create on our own, that we cannot count on. Avalon Gaston holding it down in Chicago with Coco Davis. We cannot count on philanthropy. We can't count on the government. And so we have been building what different looks like as we work on ending the vehicles that are used to put our people in prisons. And so our mantra with reimagining communities is not another one, not another one. And that puts us in direct relation with lifting up our baby girls and bringing them into spaces like this so that they can carry on to make sure that their families, their siblings, I'll stop after this, Andrea, but I just want to point out to folks, we're aware of this because we focused our attention on stopping the prisons, marching across the states that we're in and so forth, raising public awareness to shift public opinion, because we cannot change this unless we raise public awareness first to shift public opinion. And so we were acutely aware. For instance, from 1996 to 2008, they built a prison in this country every 10 days, and they crammed it full of us. And so now that is happening again in this country. 40 prisons prior to the new administration coming in were on the shovel to the ground, including the ones that we have held back from being built. And 11 of them are for women at $1 billion price tags because they're attaching hospices on the back end. That was pre-new administration. Now hundreds of new prisons are slated and will have shovel to the ground, and they are not going to be operated by state or federal governments. They will be operated by private prison industry. And so we can spend our resources fighting these prisons, and we're not gonna stop the work that we do in that arena, but we must understand that we need to, for lack of a better way of expressing it, gut our people out of these prisons. Let them build these prisons. Let them. I mean, it sounds crazy to even say, but we don't have the capacity to stop that weaponization using prisons right now. But what we can do is make sure that our people are not in them. Make sure that those vines are growing over those prisons so that they are sitting empty. And that is only something that we can do. We are boots on the ground organizers. That's all we know how to do. Everything we do starts on the ground and stays on the ground. And so we will continue to do that work. Thank you.
All right, juicy, right? You see how juicy. So I really appreciate you leading us right into this next question, which I think is really important and is grounded in what Emani was saying, with whom I respectfully disagree with the term yelder when you're 46, because where does that leave the rest of us?
As
Somewhere
elders.
between there and ancestor.
Elder.
Anyway, that's a debate for another day, perhaps one that divides us unnecessarily that we don't need to get into. Okay, but I think this question of like being clear-eyed, and when we talk to people who have lived under this kind of repressive regime and these political conditions, whether in our own, I never call it our because I'm not from here, but in the United States or around the world, the number one thing people always say is we need a really clear-eyed assessment of how we got here, where we continue to hold power, where we don't hold power, and where we build power. That is really critical. So I appreciate Emani grounding us in like, let's stay with where we have power. Let's remember where we have power. And Andrea being like, and let's be clear where we don't. And then how do we move from one to the other? Right. So I'm going to ask you all that question. Where do we have power? What tools are available to us? And which ones are no longer viable in this moment? Because we owe it to our people to not keep wielding tools that are going to keep failing us in this moment. It's too dangerous.
Yes.
So the 14th Amendment, not so much. I'm a lawyer, and I've never thought we were going to get justice anywhere in that system that was set up to enforce colonialism and slavery and repress working people. So maybe strategically sometimes we can do it, but it seems like maybe that's something that's no longer available to us. I think that we have been here before. We have lived in a time when the 14th Amendment was not. Our ancestors have, as we were reminded by the previous panel, where we were chattel, where we were people without souls, where we were people who had no right to the land that is ours. But we didn't have tech and total surveillance in the same way that we do now. We had passes, but we didn't have passes that could be enforced in the way that they can be now, right? We had slave patrols, but they didn't have the capacity to see everywhere all the time.
Right.
So just want us to really ground in this question of like, where do you see that we have and can wield and build power now, and which levers are no longer available to us, and which ones are the ones that we should be focusing on? And I do want to start with you, Emani, because you're
Thank
leaning
you.
forward into
I'm leaning
it.
forward.
And because
Because
you started to
I
answer
only
the
have
question.
half of the question, though. I'm only going to do the where we have power. Because where we no longer have power, there's folks on this panel that are better equipped to assess that. We have power in spirit. I really am always quite amazed by the fact that we open everything and close everything with ceremony, but then folks don't go and tap in with the ancestors like during work hours. I be tapped in. One of the reasons why this got turned over was I knew I was downloading when I first sat here. I was like, oh, let me just download. Because my dad will come and Kathy will come. This is Kathy's. My mama brought this to me from her home the day she transitioned. And I've avoided coming here because it felt weird to be here without her. But then I was like, what you mean without her? She's absolutely here, assessing, taking notes. I really think we're not paying attention to the fact that we've truly abandoned spirit in this work. I was very clear when my father was incarcerated, and he would call and be like, I know your throat is sore. And I was like, you 500 miles away in a cage. Like, my dad was traveling at night. My dad was coming to lay with his children. I met a lot of women who told me that they would go and visit their babies that night from prison. We used to know how to shift and move. Our people used to fly. I believe that. And I believe that the reason why they're doing so much inundation and having you on your phone is because they know that you can't hear spirit. You can't feel it with the blue lights and the eating, the ASMR, the stuff that's actually stimulating the same part of you that spirit can stimulate. So you're not looking in the right places. You're not consulting the ancestry. They absolutely have the map. They absolutely know. And so for me, it's like, truly, that's the power. You think Haiti won because they had more force? They knew how to shake that ground. They said we could do this all day. That's what they said to the French when they kept bringing in the boats. They said, we could do this all day. Keep coming. We could do it all day. And so I'm concerned that we keep wanting to have ceremony as like a beginning and not as the whole way we're doing the work. Do the work in ceremony, like do it in ceremony. When you start your day, I start every single day when I wake up, I ask, how you gonna use me today? I know I'm here to be used, use me. And I know that using is not just to scream in somebody's face. It's not to match the energy that happened in the Oval Office, you feel me? Anytime they gonna humiliate somebody, that tells me, okay, humiliation is now off the table. Like they humiliating folks now publicly, okay, I can't do it. And so for me, it's to actually start seeing what's off the table. Whatever they're doing, we don't wanna do that. We want to participate in this deep connected time, this deep connected space with one another in which the wisdom actually, we can hear it. I'll let them go, but that's really my thing about that.
You're making it hard to follow you, man.
You gotta do the hard work of where the power is.
I think, you know, a part of what, so I struggle, and I'm just gonna be vulnerable with y'all, because I struggle in this place around like world building, new world building with like being right here. And the fact that like, you know, there is a takeover of whatever thing we had. And I agree with what you're saying, the 14th Amendment, these amendments and laws have never protected my people. Every male in my family has been incarcerated. Every single one. And at the same time, we are here. We're in this place, right? And so, like, even I'm glad you bring up Haiti too, because of this idea of like spiritual force. But like, thousands and like hundreds of Haitians died with no weapons and just ran up on the fort, right? Over and over again. And that was the actual material condition that they were in. We have to face the world as like we're here. And what's about to happen is not like the other things that have happened. Like you said, there are new technologies that allow a different type of surveillance. Like right now, we all being listened to because you got your tablet, I got my phone. Stop playing. Yeah. And so
I'm talking to them too.
You're right. I mean, we are having a conversation. They in our pocket. They know where you at because you take them with you everywhere you go. They have trained you to walk around with the ID already. And so, like, we got to get real about this oppressive thing that we're in. The structure we're in is a real thing. Like, it is real. It may be an idea, somebody's imagination, but the impacts of it are real. And if we can't deal with that fact, I don't feel like we're in reality. Because when I talk to folks, I'm from Akron, Ohio. Yes, I think he's the greatest basketball player ever. Absolutely. Either one. But really the one that grew up there.
Again, a movement division that
I know, right?
I won't throw in Jason Tatum, but okay.
But, yeah, I'm just saying. We can talk about it after the panel.
When we free.
But when we're talking to people on the ground, like when I'm having conversations with people about like where we live, like my friends were leaving school in the 7th grade. Like this is the facts. Like people, when I grew, I'm a year. I got way more gray hair, but I'm a year younger than you.
I take care of this.
Don't worry. No, I'm glad the ancestors put it in like this.
I got it too.
But
What is happening here?
no, I'm just trying to be clear. I'm trying to be clear about where we're at. So in '92, when I'm 13 years old, and we in the 7th grade, my friends, a lot of them. Like I was blessed with a mama who had 2-3 jobs, and some people's mama smoked that spliff and they had something extra, so they like, their lives changed. And that's where we was. And them folks figured out that they can make more money than the teacher at the school. So they leaving school. So when we talk to them now and we say, yo, there's a reason why you should participate. Like I'm wearing a Vote Squad hoodie. There's a reason to participate in this thing. People are like, yo, this shit don't make no difference. And honestly, you can feel that, right? Like people are like, I was broke when Obama was the president. I'm broke today. Like it's all the fucking same. But the actual fact is that like in the structure we live in, like there is a reason to participate. There just is. And I have not heard, and I believe in the spiritual power. I think our ancestors used that power to push for the access that we have right now. Like the folks who died in the Civil War, the 400,000 black people who left slavery and joined the Union Army to fight and win that fight were the same ones that wanted the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to be in place in this country. And there's no fucking way to sidestep that we live here. And like, I want to be somewhere else too, but we live here. And until we deal with that fact, we're going to keep doing the same thing. There is no way, there is a way for us to take care of each other. But when you look at the numbers, 90 million people did not vote. Million. And right now we're dealing with a dictator, and it's not because they have a whole bunch of people who just ran to that side. Yes, some people did, but when you look at the numbers, I'm talking about numbers, real fucking numbers. When you look at the numbers, the increase is not that high for Trump. The decrease on the other side is amazing. And like the world we want to build, like whenever our folks have actually showed up and participated, we have created different shit, new shit, things that protected our communities, things that protected us, that allowed us to be safe and more free, even inside of a capitalist exploitive society. But the way to the next thing, I really want to just ground in that, because I wake up every day, I thank my ancestors, I'm talking to them before I open my mouth here. But there is a thing that we need to be honest about people, that they got the guns, they got more guns, We tried to fight in the 60s. There was a loss. They incarcerated everybody. We tried to build new worlds with Tulsa, but we didn't control the state, so they killed us. And there is no way around that. So what do we do? I believe that there's 90 million people, 90 million, that we should be engaging around being clear about where we're at.
Right.
If our ancestors, you think about our ancestors, this is just another thing, I'm sorry, I'm going long, but I want to say this thing that when you think about my ancestors who were enslaved, my whole family's from Union Springs, Alabama. All my great-grandmothers are buried on a plantation that's owned by Whirlpool. That's where I'm from. When I think about them, and I think about the fact that they weren't allowed to read or look at maps, I realized in their life that they didn't know where they were geographically. Like, they didn't know where they were. You got to think about this. You born, somebody might buy you when you're 3, you go to another place, everybody, this shit is happening. If you don't work, they beat your ass. That's the reality. That's the reality. That's like normal. In fact, Harriet is signaling this when she's like, I freed hundreds, I could have freed thousands if they knew they were slaves. Why? Because that's the reality that they grew up in. There's no other reality. But even then, they had maps to get free. They had stories to get free. They made quilts. They told stories about where the moss grow in the tree, right? Like there were ways to get free, but in this society, you can't cross the Mason-Dixon line. You can't cross the Ohio River and be free. The map is different now. The map is wards and precincts. It's a different map. And until we figure out how to merge what's happening in this space with the reality of what needs to happen for our people to be able to show up in these places, even at the local level. There's a group called Freedom Block in Akron that I helped build. They are like a group that the people who have power to make the budget, because budgets are value statements. You want to know what somebody care about, look at what they spend their money on. That's just facts. But when the budget gets made in Akron, they got to call Freedom Block. They got to call Freedom Block because they increased the electorate in the city by thousands of people. And that ain't us being free. We ain't gone. But on the way there to protect ourselves, we better figure out how to have some power like that, because the state has proven that if you don't have some control in that shit, you're going to be Tulsa. I don't give a shit how good your thing is or how free you think you are in this little cul-de-sac or space. If you don't control, or they'll let somebody come kill you. Like, that's facts. I want to have that discussion here on the panel because I may be wrong. And I want to hear it because I really am, I'm in this place personally where I'm like, yo, ain't no other, I don't see the way out. I know we got to use the ancestors' energy for us to move today. And we have to be in space with each other. And it is us working together. But we ain't got the guns to do it. People died for us to have access to the vote, the ballot, and all this stuff because they felt like, hey, that's something you should be trying to do. But then all the people that we need to be revolutionaries to actually take the positions and create the world we want are like, fuck the system, fuck that part. How? How does it make sense for us not to participate? And I'm not here saying that this is the only way. I'm not saying that voting is going to somehow save our ass. But I'm telling you, we need more space. In the space, they're getting tight right now. They understand it. They start closing out voting precincts in Georgia after they won, right? Mm-hmm. They get it. They get it. They're taking away your citizenship rights, right? They get rid of Section 5 in the Voting Rights Act that people died for, right? They get it. I think the time for like, man, we gotta get serious about this shit. We cannot not participate and then expect ourselves to be able to protect ourselves when they got fucking guns. Okay, I'm done.
Juice. Food for thought. Andrea?
Well, I think, thank you. I think that when you are, when you spend your days organizing in the neighborhoods and have gone through iterations of what the movement is rising to the top, and I want to talk about something very challenging, but this is the space to do it. And I'm asking for advice. I don't want to talk at you. I need some support around this to understand this issue better. But one thing I know for sure, as constantly being boots on the ground, is that we have to get small to get big. And all of the things that were mentioned, we don't have that power. But one of the things that we spent a lot of our capacity on was the call to defund the police. Now, I want us to think about this, because we all understand. I live in the most incarcerating corridor in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We are surrounded by the gang unit, the Boston Police Department, 1 million private security companies. Our communities from across the Commonwealth that are Black and brown are oppressed and controlled by law enforcement. If that were the answer, and prisons, and if that were the answer, we would be the safest place on the planet in this country. So I have always used my voice in agreement with defunding the police, and that is still where I stand. How we get there and what happens on our way there, which I learned from Andrea Ritchie, from Miriam Kaba, from Angela Davis, who in the last election, when we were struggling to figure out, well, what do we do now? She said, hold your nose and vote. Because we live in a country that is controlled by an electoral process. But I want to sincerely ask a question, as people who actually incorporated the platform of defunding the police and committed a lot of resources into carrying that. And what we learned, one, what I anticipated would happen, was that that would be hijacked through the whole discourse about, well, what does that actually mean? What does it actually mean? And yes, standing firmly, but getting there in the communities, we're not ready for that. And let me explain what I mean. One, we have too many of our community members who have been indoctrinated into believing that police are going to save us. Police and prisons do not create healthy, thriving communities. Healthy, thriving people do. And when we get caught up in just defending the mantra of defund the police in the community meetings, in the hearings, in the everything, and in a community like I live in a state like where I live, that is not going to happen, not now. And what I need right now is that as you are giving $50 million increases to the Department of Correction every year and to the Boston Police Department, I need $50 million in the Justice for Housing, in Families for Justice as Healing, in the organizations that are deeply on the ground building the infrastructures. Because when we build those infrastructures and those systems, we ourselves will eradicate the problems that we are faced with on a day-to-day basis. And if that's not going to come, we don't take state funding, we don't take federal funding. So fuck it, excuse me. But if we're not raising public awareness to shift public opinion, which means shifting those dollars. When Harris ran for president, overnight, women in this country got together and raised how much money?
Without any conditions.
Without
or
any
demands.
conditions. The same conversations are happening that we have been trying to be on the conversation about the money. Where's that money? Where it should now be allocated now that she didn't win. And as you continue to raise money for some very unclear something that the Democratic Party is conjuring, like totally unclear, you need to take that same energy and you need to fund our communities to help us to build the infrastructures that we're building. We're building with nothing, but that can help the community. The community, the Black elders in my neighborhood with the media lambasted me for suggesting that we defund the police. And one of them said, if somebody's crawling through my window at 2 o'clock in the morning, you ain't coming out to get me. Well, yeah, I would. If we had that infrastructure in place and we would get there, I'd get to my neighbor's house long before the police come, because in my neighborhood, they don't get there until it's all said and done, and then they're taking a few of us away. So yes, it can work, but without the opportunity for us to build that infrastructure, so we have to be demanding. Because some people aren't going to see it till they see it. They're not going to get it till they get it. So we're in a state of struggle with this, because we're like, we don't have the capacity anymore. We say it because we stand on it, damn it, because we know it. We know the oppression and control since slavery that has been exacted upon us and our people. So yes, defund the police. Yes. I stand on that.
Yes.
But how we get there within the communities is a very different process. And we have to focus on that. Well, dangerous, but.
So juicy. This panel is very juicy. Wow. Thank you for everything that everyone said. I really love the, Emani, what you said about spirit and centering that. And it makes me think about, you know, I work in technology, but I think a lot about what is technology anyway, you know. We've got access to all of these ancestral technologies. I'm a daughter of the, and son, I'm non-binary, of the Tamil genocide. So my people were slaughtered in big numbers over decades. And I think a lot about the technologies that got us through that. So food, stories, you know, all of the things that have been mentioned today. And I think that we are experts in technology. So how do we bring that into our movements? And I think about, you know, infrastructure a lot. And even small things, well, maybe not so small, signal as like a backbone of how we communicate with each other. How can we get creative, I guess, drawing on our ancestral technologies and blending them with, sorry, I just started on tea, so my voice is breaking. But yeah, how do we actually think about using digital technologies in ways that aren't dominated by the forces that we're fighting, and decrease our dependency upon all of these different platforms? So these forces are kind of crafting these models of governance where they want to completely control cities. So for example, you know, Cop City here in New York has a big digital component. So they want to have data sharing across 16 agencies. They want an app that is a one-stop shop for every single service. This is where you're going to get payments. This is where you apply for all kind of childcare support, any support that you need from the government. So what does that mean for policing and the control of public space? And how do we fight back against these kind of apps that are getting invisibly procured by governments behind closed doors? So yeah, I think a lot about how can we build transnational solidarities that help us with this fight. So there's an amazing organization called the Criminal Justice and Police Accountability Project. They're based in Bhopal in India, but they research Hyderabad. And the reason that they're so interested in Hyderabad is that it's a smart city. So they're deploying technologies across every aspect of the city. And particularly, they have actually had the NYPD in to train the police force in Hyderabad so that they can implement predictive policing technologies that they have here. And so they've researched that in a lot of detail. If we've got a common enemy, how do we fight together? And so that's what I'm interested in.
Can I just add something real quick?
I'm going to ask my last question. Everybody can fold into
Sure.
into that. What moves you? I just want to first express really just deep gratitude for vulnerability and willingness to be in questions, right? We come to panels, we want to talk like we know what's going on. None of us know we're off the map of our experience, and also, frankly, of my ancestors' experiences as enslaved people in Jamaica and as oppressive colonizers. Both of them. We're off everyone's map of everyone's experience, and we need to be honest about that while still drawing on what we know from our histories and our study and our repression. So I just want to be grateful to everyone for the vulnerability and the willingness to be in question. This is what we need right now. We need to not pretend to know the answers, because if we knew the answers, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
We have to not pretend that we have the power in this moment to resist this, or not to resist it. We have the power to resist, but we have been out-organized. And we need to be real about that. And we need to sit with that and then figure out how to organize back. So I appreciate that. It's clear that we will need a multi-strategy approach, but we need to not be at cross purposes. And then I also want to be clear, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to some Harris neoliberal normal. I don't want to go to regular levels of violence. Okay? I don't want to go back to Roe.
Right.
I want to go to freedom. I want to go to liberation. And while this moment is difficult, there are opportunities. There are opportunities. The police are completely unmasked now, right? So we can get into that conversation and be like, we keep saying the police are from slave patrols. Do you see how they're protecting them white supremacists right now on your block? Yeah. We said that criminalization was not going to end gender-based violence. Do you see what people are doing, what the cops are doing right now inside prisons, outside prisons, and everywhere to facilitate, promote, enact, be gender-based violence? We have the opportunity to show them unmasked right now. And we do that by engaging, but not with systems that are broken, with the systems that we want to build. And we do it at the level that we can, and we each have agency around ourselves, our lives, and we can expend our reach. So there's many ways that people are thinking about these things, about how we fight for the world we want, not just what we think we can get right now or how we can stay safer right now. The number of frameworks have been offered. They all have, they start with R, they start with D, but I've heard most of them with some version of B. So some version of block, build, break, bridge or broaden, and build. And Mariam and I are doing a workshop tomorrow where we're going to be kind of delving deeper into that, like all those B's, but make it abolitionist. Like what? Because I think a lot of those frameworks are focused on electoral politics and litigation and legal strategies. And there may be places where they are useful to buy us more time and space, but they are not the end, and they're not going to win us. So is my personal opinion.
And Andrea, though, I think that we should also remember the work that was done collectively around the 60s.
Right.
Because this is a roadmap that we have already created as a collective that is very important that we look at, understand what those 60s are, because each one of those things in the workshop that you created with many of us years ago in that room, these are all things that we need to be doing right now. the 60s until she's free. And I hope that people are still paying attention to that.
And I think we think about how we do those within this. And I think what's really important is exactly what you just said, which is in this moment, people are like, oh, resistance, anti-fascist resistance, fighting for democracy, and all like running after that ball like we're toddlers on the soccer field, as if it's not the same fucking work that we've been doing as abolitionists always, right? And so you're absolutely right to say that. The 6 Ds are, document where state harm is happening, decriminalize everything, which is what I said at the beginning, decarcerate, which is what Andrea said, get everyone out, divest, and dismantle death-making systems of harm, and dream. That's the work that has come out of, formerly incarcerated and criminalized and incarcerated women's movements as a way to free her. That's where we presented that at the 2020 Beyond the Bars, right before the pandemic. I'm raising these larger frameworks because everyone's like, oh no, now this is the thing. And I do want us to be like, we are already in this. And where do we situate our work in these frameworks already? So we can see ourselves, and we can also see that it's not just about waiting 4 years out as if that's gonna be a thing, right? Or just all changing what we do, when in fact, we have to sit with where we have power and where we're gonna build it. So,
And gives people a roadmap for where they can get in.
right, exactly. So that's what I wanted to end with, is all of you sort of going deeper into wherever you see your work in that frame, whether it's about blocking something from happening, whether it's about breaking both coalitions and alliances that are making what's happening right now, or breaking with our phones. Because I'm old enough to have organized before the internet and computers. And I can assure you, it can be done.
Right.
People ended slavery. People overthrew colonial regimes. People did all kinds of shit without handing the state the information and the relationships and the networks they were using to do it. So I will tell everyone, get the fuck off those things. Use paper and words, because otherwise you're giving them information and power. So for me, it's about breaking not just their coalitions and forces, but the things within us that are keeping us from freedom.
That's right.
And then blunting the impacts is really important to defend our communities, because we live in this world. It's real. And we have to make sure that as many of us survive this as possible, which means we need to blunt and break the systems that harm us. And we need to broaden our movements. We need to be in the conversations that Andrea and DaMareo are talking about, which is to be in our community, on our block, and engaging people. And they don't have to participate in something that's broken, but they have to participate in something, building something. And then where are we building not just our imaginations, but the power to make our imaginations real? So I want to invite all of you to just go deeper into whichever one of those speaks to you, or whichever ones speak to you, as an invitation, as Andrea is saying, to all of us to get in wherever makes sense in that framework, to get in this fight and to build towards abolitionist futures. And I am going to start with you, Dhaksh, because I really think that this question of the surveilled society, and also the question of how migrants are being separated out from the we, along with trans people, are central to how we resist this moment. So I'm curious where you see your work on any of those fronts within this framework, and what your invitation is to people as we walk out of here.
Yes, great question. So I would say the Surveillance Resistance Lab, because we're about visibilizing the invisible kind of way that tech and the internet kind of mediates and solidifies power, we are probably situated in the build aspect. We work really to expand the terrain of our organizing. So, for example, we are doing some collaborative research on mobile driver's licenses, so digital driver's licenses, which sound really benign, but in fact, they are an infrastructure that the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, has been pushing for a very long time, and is being taken up by many, many states, kind of, and not being monitored or tracked, really. And so, through this this infrastructure, the data sharing through that is is problematic, not just for migrants in terms of ICE surveillance, but also for trans young people who might be trying to access online content. So there's a lot of implications of these kinds of infrastructures. So we're kind of we're kind of trying to stitch movements together to look at these types of technologies and create links that haven't necessarily been there before, and kind of think about creative ways to intervene. And I'm really passionate, in addition to kind of visibilizing how the architecture of surveillance is working, also thinking about how can we, like I said, just think creatively about what technologies can we build? Like, what is our alternative social media platform? Have we realistically engaged with kind of some of these questions? So that's kind of what's animating our work at the moment.
Thank you so much. I just want to name again that for when they're trying to find trans people to enforce the healthcare bans against, they ask who's changed their driver's license and they use databases. When they track who's getting healthcare, they use electronic health records. So you might leave where you are and go somewhere else to get your care, but someone back where you were knows. So we have to figure out how we're going to break these systems and how we're going to build our own methods of communications that are not controlled by the very people who are trying to kill us. So I just want to deeply appreciate you and the work that you're doing and lift that up. Emani, you want to go next?
Sure. Our work right now is very focused on organizational recovery and making sure, I mean, for me, my big thing is I've been teaching myself about mergers because I think that I loved when Andrea said we got to get small to get big. I actually think when I grew up, my mother was running Osborne in 1982. It was like 2 people. And I loved New York, how we did work back then, because nonprofits were tiny and people did what they were really good at. Everybody didn't try to take all the funding and do everything in their own house and then do it poorly. And so I think we're actually, like, what we're really focused on is that we're in a moment where we might actually come back to mastery. Funders always ask us, how are we going to grow? I say we focus on mastery, not scale. And so for me, this is a moment where we could actually get really focused on using the genius that we have and having people go back to very small collaborative work to start. I've been talking, back channeling with organizations and with funders asking who has the capacity to absorb who. Like, who is aligned enough? The lawyers will have to do the legal part of the mergers. I'm not interested in that. But what I'm interested in is the cultural collaboration, the fact that many folks came home from prison with a vision, built organizations. They have great vision. They're not all great at running organizations. And that's fine. A lot of our work is around supporting folks around that. But the reality is that what we really want to do is be on the ground and be with the people. And there are people that love doing the infrastructure part. It's usually not us. And so there are opportunities to kind of bring us together. The other work that I do, though, is I'm a death doula. I've been supporting people in transition since 2012, and I had the privilege of helping my father go home in 2017. My father was shot seven times in Attica. 7 times in Attica. So when I was taking care of his body at the end of his life, as he started to waste away and lose everything, the buckshot that was all through his body started coming to the surface. One of the things I learned from helping my dad go home was that death isn't the worst thing. And what I hear in this moment, and I heard it from you, and one of the things I really appreciated about this panel was that I think you got to see the true vulnerability of Andrea saying, like, we having a problem with this agenda. We need to work. In our work, we focus on alignment, not agreement. And one of the things that I think has been very sad for me about this movement is that we've fractured because we don't agree on certain shit. I don't care. I'm in the boat with you. I got an oar, I'm rowing, right? Like, I don't care what you want to call yourself. I don't care what your organization is. I don't care. I was given principles as a young kid. I also didn't know that payphones were for outgoing calls until I was like 11. So part of the surveillance thing is like, I will be honest, like Signal, I think it's the police. I don't believe that anything that you think that they gave you that's secure would be. To me, that gotta be the feds. But I digress. The other thing is, like, that's okay. That's okay. Like, all of that thing to me is the fear. And what I'm most interested in is this process of being vulnerable with one another and saying, I'm triggered by this shit. Because that's what happened. That's what we saw happen, right? And he kept coming back to, they have guns. And all I kept coming back to when my mom was deaf is not the worst thing. My father offered, Attica was a blood sacrifice. That's how I hold it. That's how I need to hold it. They want to talk to you about what the brothers did out there or didn't do, what the police didn't do. They were stargazing. Some of those men had never seen stars before because they were from cities. And so when they were out in the yard, they were looking at the stars. What do you think they were talking about? What do you think they were thinking about? So part of it is just, I want us to be in deeper dialogue and to get aligned in the fact that we all are trying to end up in the same place and to stop being so oppositional about, I like Kamala, I don't. I don't care about the lady, right? Like, I don't really like her. I'm in California. I remember what happened there. But that's not the point, right? The point is that we're supposed to be aligned. When I look at you, sis, and you tell me, hey, this is where I need you to go. My kids are over here. This is what we're doing. I need you to come. I'm coming because I'm with you. I don't have to do all the other stuff. And so here for me, that's my plea. That's our work right now, is like really trying to get people back to the thing. Andrea and I could probably sit there around the defunct. We agree about more. I agree with her all the time. That's like, I just will follow her anywhere. But I actually trust that. Like, I trust the fact that we got to really start deepening that, which is like, I'll trust you. I'll go with you anywhere. Like, are you going to freedom? Yes. Then I'm going with you. I don't care what your theory of change is. Like, stop getting so heated about the little stuff. That's not what this is about. It's so much deeper than that. But the one thing I want to end with is really telling you death is not the worst thing. We're all going to do it. And I think that they win because they got the gun, and you then feel that that's the worst part. We just watched for a year as people released themselves in Palestine into death with faith I have never seen. Now I understand why my father told me everybody is a Muslim. You're born a Muslim. Because so when I'm saying spirit, I'm not trying to shirk the work. It's never been like that. I was not raised naive. My family, my parents gave their lives for this. I'm just telling you, there's not a lot left. Let me tell you what's at the end. You die. You better have a good time while you're here. You came here to have a body. You know why you have a body? It wasn't just to suffer. It was to make love and eat chocolate and feel the wind. Like, you're supposed to have pleasure too. So all of it is together. And so part of it is like, let's keep having these conversations. Let's keep letting our brothers get triggered and be like, no, yeah. That's also part of it. But when you get triggered, you got to come back to the ancestor. You got to come back to spirit. And then we go and we fight again.
Yes, indeed.
Okay?
Yes, indeed.
It's not one or the other. And that's the thing, is we keep thinking there's one other route. There's not one route. We just all on the same path. Wide.
Yeah.
It's wide.
Yeah.
And there's as many ways to get there as there are of us. But I want you to feel the love of it. We're doing this because we love each other. When my father was 10 most wanted on the FBI list when I was 5 years old, and he ran for a year, when they captured him, my daddy said, they're going to say a lot of things about me that aren't true. I want you to remember 2 things about me. I loved my people, and I wanted to see them free.
One, I want to go after you because I want to thank you for identifying the trigger and then actually like sitting with me in that. You know, I appreciate it. I just appreciate it. It is a trigger. You know, because I feel like sometimes, and I'm not just saying they got the guns, because blood sacrifice is how we won all them things you was talking about. There is that's what happens. There will be a blood sacrifice. I believe that. That's no. But I just don't want. I want to stay in the real world. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like sometimes we floating out and not realizing where we at. That is a requirement. It ain't just giving somebody food and being nice. It's like, we got real shit we gonna have to do. It's on the horizon. And then as to like this block build break thing, that is like it's very much the language in philanthropy and spaces that I find myself.
It's organizers too.
I mean, like, people are trying to figure out how to get out of this shit, you know? But I would say, I just wrote a couple of things where we're talking about it. I think we have to be grounded in the reality of, like, we are all trying to figure out a very difficult situation, right? Like something we've never been in before. So staying grounded, that's why I appreciate what you're saying and what you're actually doing on this panel right now. I do believe like budgets are value statements, and we should be figuring out how we take over those budgets, right? When we think about federal elections, and I'm just gonna speak a little bit about strategy because I think about it as strategic base building. Like, how do we build base strategically? A lot of people talk about, oh, we need to organize, we need to have movement, but what happens in movement is you just bring a bunch of people and they do a thing, and then nobody got their contact. Ain't nobody following up. Where's the one-to-one and that, the things that help bring people in. But I think, I mean, for real, I'm thinking about, like, what would it look like to take over smaller cities? Right? What would it look like to find, like, some cities with 200,000 people or less, like the one I'm from, like Akron, and say, like, yo, we could go there and take that shit over. If you're looking at the numbers and only, like, 20% of the people are voting, well, why not we go there? Why don't movement people go there instead of just staying in New York or California or D.C., right? Like, why not go to the Midwest and think about a set of cities that we could take over and then run a set of experiments in a bunch of different cities? Like, that's something we could do as a movement that we could, like, actually think about doing together. People who are really down and willing to move, like moving to some of these places, and let's build institution, organization in there. Say we have 200 of them. Some of them gonna live, some of them ain't. But then we can run some experiments if we could take over those budgets about how we actually do defund the police, right? So like something like that seems like a good thing. Thinking about 2030 as a year of like, they're gonna draw the census. And the thing about the census is if you empower, well, after the census, we draw the lines, right? Like these are things we need to understand is like the congressional districts are drawn from where people are in the census. One thing, our people don't take the census because it's like, oh, I'm giving data to the government. I don't want to take this shit. I was in a room one time and somebody was like, oh, it's weird because this election, my mic is out. This election shows that there's more black people in Ohio than the census. And I was like, and it was Obama's election. I'm like, during the Obama election, you probably find out how many black people were in Ohio than any census that has ever happened ever. Right? Because people were lined up in lines, like people were voting for Obama, right? Like and they were like, oh, there must be something wrong with the numbers because I'm like, no, actually nothing's wrong with those numbers. Black people aren't taking census, right? But once you take the census, what happens if you don't have power in your state, and the people who do have power are these Klan people and neo-Confederates, then they draw these districts in a way that puts like part of Cleveland in with the black part of Akron, and then it's like literally they draw these gerrymander lines, and then one person represents all the black people between 30 miles. Yeah. Right? So we need to understand this as a way of like us building power and thinking about how we take over some spaces. And I believe there are places, when you think about 90 million people not voting, 90 million. For anybody who's an organizer in here, somebody gave you a list of 90 million people and said, go find some people, you'd be like, sweet. 90 million people? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to get some folks, you know what I mean? Like, all of them ain't going to come, but the ones that I just need like 5%. You know what I'm saying? Think about it. We had 5 to 10% of that 90 million. We could put that in anything we wanted and pull it wherever we want. We could tea party any party or whatever. Because that's what they did, right? Like, that's what they did. They took, like, the other thing to be clear about is the people who are in the offices that run the president, they are not Republicans. They are Confederates. They don't give a shit. They just use the Republican Party to use their agenda, to move their agenda, so that these corporations and Confederates could take control. And now the Republicans are like, oh shit, you about to take our schools and healthcare? Right? I mean, that's what's happening right now. That's what's happening. They didn't care which party it was. They just were taking it. And I think, like, if there's 90 million people out here that we should be engaging, that, like, there's an opportunity for us to do that to wherever we want to do it. And so part of the challenge that I'm pushing to y'all is, like, let's use all the moments to continue to build base. Let's use all the moments to raise the consciousness of our people. We need to make sure everybody knows what environment we're in. And then, like, think about how you or how somebody you know could be in places like these small cities. It's not New York. I mean, New York is important, but it's like Akron, Youngstown, Augusta, right? Like, these places are the places where we can start building stuff to win in the future. Plus, they can be enclaves to help us protect ourselves if we all move to certain ones and take those municipalities over. Like, I'm really on that level. Like, what are the strategic municipalities that we could take, run some experiments, and figure out, like, what we can do in the future? So, I mean, that's my challenge to this room, is to, like, think like you said also, it's like getting smaller to get bigger. Like, think about these smaller geographies that we could take over instead of, like, trying to do this major thing in New York. You could, like, I'm telling you, put $1 million in a city like Akron, you could take the whole city council. Like, that's true. That's true. So like, you know what I'm saying? Or we put enough hands in a place like that, we could take that. We could take these places, and they like abandoned, like the foreclosures. There's buildings there. You know, we built the thing in Akron. It was $450 a month to pay for a place we call the Way of Mind and Body, and that's what built the Freedom Block thing now. And that's now like pushing the administration, the municipality. We got council people in there. You know what I'm saying? Like those, that's like a strategic way for us to think about moving forward.
Bring us home, Andrea.
So the three quick things that I'm just putting out there for food for thought and for anybody who wants to engage later, not just today, later. I have to go back to Boston right now. But three things that came about, and thank you to all of these amazing, committed family that's on this panel. One is a process called co-governance. And I think it's very important as we try and think about building, you know, electoral power, if that's a inroad into our liberation. We have to think about not the traditional process of electoral politics. We have to think about co-governance. We have to think about people's assembly processes. And this is why things such as, you know, whatever people call it, when we get small and use processes like reimagining communities to raise public awareness, to shift public opinion and get people back engaged and involved, we have to simultaneously be introducing our people to these different types of how we come to decision about what it looks like to create healthy, thriving communities. And I think that we should all be looking and learning about that process of co-governance, because we can elect anybody we want to, we can fight and march and raise money to put people into office. But if they get there and they're all by themselves, there's nothing they can do. And we see it over and over and over again, because they are not engaging with a process that is a people-led process, where they're not way up here, but they are amongst and in the communities with their constituency, and the community and the people are co-governing. They're figuring out what do we need and how are we gonna get it, and what's the best way for these resources to be utilized. That's one. The other thing that we have been grappling with is the idea around technology. We're a community in the formerly and currently incarcerated who now are if you go to our community park, Washington Park, Leslie, in the summertime, Washington Park, there is a young Black man without an ankle shackle on. And so the proliferation of how the systems just continue to create other opportunities to incarcerate us now in our own communities. We don't have enough shelters for the people who are without homes, and they don't even in the shelters have enough electrical plugs. So you're constantly under threat. And you could be even, the technologies are so bad that you can be laying in your bed while you're relegated to an ankle shackle after serving 10, 15, 25 years in prison. Still, Leonard Pelletier is on an ankle shackle right now. So we have to think about this, and this is why every time I come to Beyond the Bars, I tell people all the time, I meet amazing, dynamic people who are thinking about the things that we are struggling to better understand. So I am really, really very happy to meet you. And the last thing, right, the technology piece, surveillance capitalism, these are things that we need to be talking about and understanding how they're affecting our lives. And the last thing that we are in the process of doing, and this takes collaboration across the country, because the old-fashioned technologies only go so many miles. And that is, what is it? What actually is it to do what Andrea is talking about? They are in our homes. You can't snore without somebody hearing you. You know, we sit our phones by our beds. We never shut them off. You know, it's crazy. We're surveilling ourselves with Ring and all of these other instruments that law enforcement comes and commandeers from us and demands information from, which they can see anyway. We have pings that go off. If you step out, Avalon, 2 seconds outside of the range of your ankle shackle, you are getting a phone call. You will be in the mall buying your children school clothes, and you will get a phone call saying you need to report immediately. Well, where the hell? That's a multi-billion-dollar industry that has been created off of surveilling and tracking us. So I think that learning, and it's a bridge also, because it's not just us. They're not just tracking us. It's a bridge for us to raise the level of awareness in other communities that don't really give a shit about us, but they care about somebody tracking them and their children. So that's a bridge to help us raise awareness by getting this information and having these conversations. And the last thing that I just want to finish with is that alternate communication. We do hyperlocal, get small to get big organizing. So there's all kinds of ways that you can utilize alternate forms of communication that do not involve this current technology. There are two-way radios. There are all kinds. If we don't, these tools may be very important in the coming days. But then we also have to connect. We connect. Our sisterhood goes from Boston to California and to the north and to the south. And how do we then start like the quilts? We have quilts with the names of sisters who are buried in prisons in every single state. And when we get sisters home, they take a picture next to their name on that quilt. But quilts, we selected quilts because they have always been a tool of resistance amongst our people. We put messages in our quilts. Just the quilts themselves, making the quilts is a sisterhood project where we come together and shore each other up. And we all know when we come out of prison, we need something bigger than ourselves to work on to survive all of the terrorism that is afflicted upon us post-incarceration. But we need to think very serious about this. What are those alternate forms of communication? This isn't woo-woo stuff. This is very practical. This is very responsible to our people because, God bless him, my husband, we lost my dad, my husband, my brother, and my mom in the past 2 years. My mom was the last one. She passed away on January 10th. And grief is very real in our communities, which is another thing that we have got to, the sisterhood is what picked me up and brushed me off. And having this work to do, when I finally was able to get up off the floor, was what allowed me and spoke to me in all of my pain that we had work to do. And that our ancestors expected us to get up and get it done, continue to do it. But those things are very, very important. How do we create those alternate ways of communicating and stitch them together so that we are connected? And how are we going to deal with the technology tracking and whatever the third point is that I made?
So I just really want us to leave with deep gratitude and express deep gratitude for this group of people for showing us and talking to us about how we move in alignment, rooted in spirit, and in deep commitment to each other's care, whether we know each other or not. If we are in community, we are fighting for each other like we're fighting for our lives and for ourselves. That we disagree without tearing each other down. Yeah. We don't all agree on this panel. There might be some deep disagreements on this panel, but we do it with a view to sharpening our analysis to getting us all closer to freedom. Yes. And that I'm just grateful for modeling that, because these are the conversations we need to have. That I don't know, or I don't know about what you just said, or I don't know what we said before, or I don't know about how we bridge between our imagination, our revolutionary imagination, and the present. And so also grateful for the reminder that we need to seize the resources. There are resources.
Yes.
We need to seize them.
Yes.
And we need to think about how we're going to build power from the smallest place possible. But we have to act, and really pushing people to act and to experiment and to do that with freedom and liberation on our minds. So I hope that folks continue these conversations in the workshops this afternoon, in your communities when you go back, in every space you can, your family, your faith community, your childcare collective, your quilting collective, your friend group, at the bar tonight, on the dance floor, I don't care. We need to be having these conversations with this kind of realness, vulnerability, commitment to freedom, commitment to disagree without disintegrating, and to moving in alignment towards freedom from where we are to where we want to be. So thank you all for being here this morning, and please give it up for this incredible. Lunch is on the concourse level, box lunches, and then workshops start in an hour.
And everyone, just one quick announcement about the healing room.
How are you all? I know that you're all in transit.
Can y'all give attention to our sisters with important announcements?